Hi there, this is Student Guide Live and we will be discussing the conditions of residential status applicable to Hindu undivided family, that is HUF. We have already discussed that HUF can be ROR, RNOR or NR. HUF can never be just resident. The conditions which determine whether the HUF SSE will be ROR, RNOR or NR are prescribed by section 6.2 and section 6.6b. The conditions of section 6.2 determine whether the HUF SSE will be resident or non-resident, and the conditions of section 6.6b determine whether the resident HUF SSE will be ordinarily resident or not ordinarily resident. It means conditions of section 6.6b are applicable to only those HUF SSEs who have fulfilled the conditions of section 6.2. There are two conditions in section 6.2. To become resident, HUF SSE must fulfill any one of these two conditions. In other words, if HUF fulfills any one of these conditions, then it will be treated as resident. Before I start discussing the conditions, I want you to remember four things. An individual is a natural person, hence the idea of residential status of an individual SSE is based on stay in India. However, HUF is an artificial person. The concept of stay in India cannot be applied to determine the residential status of HUF. Therefore, instead of stay in India, a new concept is introduced by section 6.2. It is called as control and management. The term control and management refers to de facto control. It does not refer to de jure control. In other words, control as per facts should be considered and not control as per records for legal purpose. Just like individual, residential status is not permanent, but it is an annual phenomenon. The SSE must check his residential status every year. The year in question is called as relevant previous year. For our convenience, I will call it as RPY. Lastly, remember that control and management does not refer to the place where Karta resides. It is not a place where all or some of the co-partners reside. It also does not mean the registered office of the HUF. It means a place where the routine or non-routine decisions of the HUF are taken. So it is possible for HUF to have all its members including Karta to reside outside India, still the control and management can be within India. Let us now understand the conditions. A combined reading of both the conditions of section 6.2 states that if the control and management of the HUF is situated either wholly or partly in India, then the HUF is said to be resident in India during the RPY. The only important condition is that the control and management should be in India, whether wholly or partly is immaterial, since in both the cases the HUF will be treated as resident in India. On the other hand, if the control and management of the HUF is neither wholly nor partly situated in India during the RPY, only then the HUF will be treated as non-resident in India. If the HUF SSE is non-resident, then there is no need to check the conditions of section 6.6b. But if it is resident, then it is necessary to check the conditions of section 6.6b. It is more like your result. If a student has not cleared the exam, then the result is failed. On the other hand, if the student has cleared the exam, then the result is not just passed, but he would love to tell passed with first class or passed with second class, etc. Similarly, if HUF is resident in India, then section 6.6b will determine its class of ordinary residence. Although the structure of residential status of HUF is similar to individual, the idea of section 6.6b is slightly different. In case of individual, the ordinary residence of individual is determined by the provisions of section 6.6a, which must be fulfilled by the individual himself. However, ordinary residence of HUF is determined by the provisions of section 66B, which must be fulfilled by not the HUF but the Karta of the HUF. In other words, section 66B states that the HUF will be ordinarily resident if its Karta fulfills the given conditions. This is a little strange provision, since it states that the status of one is dependent on the fulfillment of condition by the other. To make some sense out of it, let us take an example of a student like you. If you study very well and secure rank in your examination, then your rank will change the status of your parents too. Now they will also be called as parents of a ranker. Although you did the studies, you gave the exam and you secured the rank, the status of your parents has changed. Similarly, fulfillment of section 66B by Karta will change the ordinary resident status of the HUF. Now that you have clearly understood the idea of section 66B, let us now check the conditions given by section 66B. Section 66B states that Karta must fulfill both the conditions of section 66A. That is, the stay of Karta in India should be at least 730 days in 7 previous years immediately preceding the RPY, and Karta should have been resident in India in any 2 out of 10 previous years immediately preceding the RPY. If both these conditions are fulfilled by Karta, then the resident HUF will be treated as ordinarily resident, that is ROR. On the other hand, if the Karta fails to fulfill any one of these conditions, then resident HUF will be treated as not ordinarily resident, that is RNOR. Before we conclude, I would like you to note that section 66B requires Karta to fulfill the conditions of section 66A only. It does not expect the Karta to fulfill the conditions of section 61. In other words, if the Karta did not stay in India at all during the RPY, but he fulfills the conditions of 730 days in 7 previous years and resident in any 2 out of 10 previous years, then despite of the fact that the Karta himself is non-resident in RPY, the HUF can become ROR. With this, we come to an end of discussion on residential status of HUF. For more details on this topic, check our website containing online notes.